Alright, where to start? So, this is going to be the new project update, I guess, video for the Santa Fe, Hallmark Santa Fe 280. So, first off, as soon as I took off this pilot, everything just broke apart. Basically, the ladders were just barely attached to the pilot, so it just basically broke right off. This structural frame piece, which is meant to be like around here, as you can see, it's also just broken off, which is always fun. It means more soldering for me. Besides that, I figured the chest already has those two major scrapes in the front, but then also has this weird mark in the bottom, as well as some scratch paint on the side. So I figured I'd just repaint that. Might as well. As I said, the front part's gonna be repainted. And then the truck here, the pilot truck here is, I'm gonna repaint it too. It's not a big deal. There's this weird mark thing. I suspect it's either like a hair or something that's stuck underneath the paint, but in any case, this is not a big deal, so I might just leave it even bare. It doesn't need to be painted. So, anyways, those will be repainted, as well as the drive rods, which I took off. They're all painted black, and they, as a result, they're kind of sticky, which I don't really like. So I'm gonna be repainting those, and then I'm not gonna paint anything else. Now, I would love to repaint the wheels and do the entire chassis again, repaint the entire chassis, but I'm not going to. You can see there's some weird bubbles forming on the on that main third wheel there. I don't really know what to do with that. And one thing to note is that you can very clearly tell this was painted with the wheels and everything assembled. You can see there's the bare spot on the same area of the wheel, and that is because that is where the wheels are positioned while with the drive rod's covering it basically. So the drive rod was, covering it while it was painted. So basically, and all the wheel assembly was painted with the drive rods attached, which I never like. It allows paint to go to areas that you should not let them go to. And that includes the inside here. You can see that the inside is also painted, which is not good. It means that the paint is getting between the wheels and the bearings, and it creates for a really rather annoying task of trying to get the paint out. But, yeah, so that is something unfortunate that I'm just going to have to deal with. I don't think I'm going to bother too much with it. It rolls freely, and ideally, in a perfect world, I would, clean all the paint off of the chassis, but I think it rolls fine. And this frame is not sprung or anything like that, so it's really not a big deal. Yeah, so I'm just going to leave it as is. I might repaint the wheels. They just look so awful. Anyways. Yeah, so I'm going to be stripping the drive rods as well as all this stuff off of paint. I'm going to attempt to resolder the pilot, and I'm going to center the headlight on the front there. But that is update number 1, so I'll be right back. Alright, I changed my mind. I am actually going to be repainting the wheels because I realized there's actually paint, because it was painted with the, without disassembling the chassis, there's paint actually in the insides of the wheels, which is just really frustrating, and it looks really bad in my opinion. Also, you can see that the inside here is filthy. Turns out there actually is sprung drivers, and that's actually this piano wire here, I assume. I thought this piano wire was for pickup, but that didn't make any sense because obviously the frame is all metal, so it picks up power like that. So I was kind of curious as to why there was this weird wire going around. And turns out it is actually for the suspension, for the springiness of the wheels. But that thing is covered in just grease and just black paint, so it's really not giving that great of suspension. So I'm going to be taking the wheels out like so, and I'm going to be repainting those too, and then I'll try to clean the chassis as best as possible. Here's another downside of painting with the wheels on. You get this this effect, which is just terrible. But anyways, I can't do much about that. Should I repaint this too? I really don't want to. I don't know. Oh my god, it looks so awful. I might repaint this too. God damn it. Alright, so I stripped all the paint, including the frame. I ended up doing it anyways because it wasn't that big of a deal, and it just looked horrendous. So, yeah. Everything turned out pretty well. No additional parts broke off, which is always good. The wheels turned out pretty good, actually. Now, one thing to note is that I thought those bubbles were air bubbles between the paint and the wheel itself. But as you can see here, the bubbles are actually inside the cast. and I believe this is a copper cast because I tried to pop one of the bubbles, which was successful, and because I was popping it with a X-Acto knife and screwdriver. I kind of scraped the top, and it was a copper sheen to it. So this actually might be cast copper wheels, which is definitely better, and definitely won't, zinc pest definitely won't occur, which is very fortunate because Hallmark engines kind of have a minor reputation of having that problem. Anyways, yeah, so the wheels are pretty good. Unfortunately, I can't really do much about those bubbles. I don't want to sand them because I might get rid of that top layer of copper, which I don't really want to do. There's definitely a reason why it's darkened, besides just for looks. Anyways, yeah, and then the pilot here, I resoldered it back together, so I got the this support structure, this support frame right here soldered back on. It is definitely not the best solder job. I soldered it. I used a bit more solder than usual because I wanted to make sure it was, structurally secure. And then I kind of used the file and filed some of the rough edges away. I intentionally soldered on the inside instead of the outside because this way you really can't see the soldering job anyways. So it's really not a big deal that it looks bad, but it is a very solid solder job. It doesn't go anywhere now anymore, so it's really nice. As well as the ladders. This I definitely I use less solder and try to have a better job. As you can see, the amount of solder I use is very minimal, and it shouldn't show through the paint once it is painted. And yeah, now the ladders are very solid on the pilot, which looks good. The last thing I did is lower the headlight. So pretty simple. I just pulled the headlight out, desoldered it, and then I drilled a new hole, put the headlight back in. I didn't solder it because this is some really thick brass, and I didn't get to drill the hole through all the way. There was no reason to. That's the old hole for the headlight. If you can actually look at it very closely, you can sort of see the original hole. Here, let me actually stick a thing through the whole hole. Hopefully that'll work. Yeah, so you can see where the original hole is, and you can see there's quite a bit. I dropped it down quite a bit. Now the headlight is finally centered, or maybe even a little bit lower than centered, which is what I like. I think it looks a lot better lower than center than it is having it mounted too high. So anyways, that I think looks a lot better now. It looks much more Santa Fe-esque instead of that KMCO stuff. Which, the raised headlight I think looks really ugly. It's what Reading engines look like, and I don't really like the look of that. So anyways, yeah, and then I also, one last thing is I drilled a hole through the headlight housing before I mounted it. I just used super glue to mount it. Or CA glue. I didn't bother using solder because, as I said, I didn't drill the hole through all the way. But now I can use this original hole as the LED wiring hole. So I drilled a hole through the headlight now, the headlight casting itself, so I can mount an LED and have the wires go through the original hole, which is actually rather useful. So yeah, this is now all done. I'm gonna wash it with some soap and water to get rid of that soldering flux, and also the finger oils, and I'm going to start painting this. I'm just going to use a regular flat acrylic paint, probably Model Master stuff, because I have a lot of that stuff going around, or a lot of that stuff to spare, and yeah, we'll see how it goes. But that's pretty much it for the second update now. Everything is shipped and ready for painting. Alright, now another update. So, I currently have the things in the basement. The paint's currently drying on them. I masked each of the parts up, and then I applied a Tamiya gray primer onto them. So right now they're drying, but when that's done, there'll be black paint and then clear coat, and they'll be ready. But in the meantime, though, I'm currently working on the electronics of this engine. So here's a tender. I actually took the tender chassis off, and you can see there's quite a few scratches on here. I don't think it's that big of a deal though. It kind of gets dinged up because the tender trucks, which are also brass, tend to scratch the sides up anyway, so it's not a big deal. I don't think it's warranted. It doesn't warrant a repainting, so I think it's fine. One thing it is missing though is speaker holes, so I need to drill those. As far as the tender shell goes, once I took the frame off, the guy actually had this thing right here, which is basically a little brass piece with a lead weight on it that basically, folds in right there. And it's cool and all, but I mean, first off, you're not unable to access that with this thing on. And second off, yeah, I mean, the tender, it's actually surprisingly heavy, even without the lead weight. And once I had a supercapacitor, the decoder, and all the wiring or whatever, and the speaker, it will actually be rather heavy. So I don't think it's needed. So yeah, that's not really necessary. But interestingly, Hallmark already had a nice little area, available for you to put wires through. So that's really nice. I don't need to drill a hole for there. Otherwise, though, I need to drill a hole for the headlight. 2 holes, one in the back of the headlight, and one to get the wires through the deck plate or the tender deck here. Also, they do have this red light here. I do believe Santa Fe used it. They had the red light going when the engine was sitting on a siding or whatever, or just stationary. There's a whole rule book which I know. I didn't really figure it out. I kind of forgot. But anyways, yeah, there is a rule book that tells you when Santa Fe uses that red light in the rear. Some manufacturers, interestingly, actually paint that thing white, like Broadway Limited. They think that's a backup light and painted it white and had it so it turned on during reverse, but that's actually false. It's not meant to be like that. It's meant to only be red. It's meant to be red, and it's supposed to only be on during certain specific times. Anyways, I'm not going to be powering that thing. I don't think it's worth it. It's a real pain to do. I need to drill a little tiny thing out without rigging it, and I don't know. They're like Santa Fe, they weren't always on. So, anyways, regardless, so yeah, basically this thing just needs 2 holes drilled for the light and the speaker holes drilled out, and that should be pretty easy. In the meantime, though, the engine, I took the decoder out. This is a Digitrax 142 decoder, which means that it is, I believe, 1 amp. 4 means 4 light functions, and 2 means, I think, FX2, which means like basically the lighting outputs, if there's marsh lights or whatever. FX6 is what they currently use. FX2 is kind of outdated. But anyways, it's a really nice decoder. I'm going to be saving this. I'm not going to toss it, obviously, but it isn't really useful for this engine because I do plan to add sound. But yeah, this open frame motor is too outdated. Yeah, it's rather noisy. It's not skew wound. And I don't know, it's just kind of big and clunky. So I'm trying to figure out which motor to use out of my odds and ends motor collection. I was considering using a Canon DN22 motor because it's about the right size, and it does fit inside the cab rather well. Also, it's a little bit shorter, so it won't be sticking out of the cab nearly as much as the original motor did. I also have a few others. One of my favorites is this one right here. But I mean, if I have space for a bigger motor, I'll always go for a bigger motor. So I'll probably be using that. This one's a bit too big. This flywheel will stick out of the cab, which I really don't want to do. And the other ones are too small. So yeah, I'll probably be using a Canon one or this one, depending on whichever one I think works a little bit better. But yeah, the gearbox, I did clean it up. I basically took the entire thing apart and removed all the old grease and put some fresh grease in. I haven't tested if it's smooth or quiet. From videos of the engine running, I do think it's pretty loud, but I haven't tested with this one yet. So once I have the frame and everything painted and the wheels all done, I'll put this on and see if it's too loud. But in the meantime, this will be connected with some tubing, which I have right here. This is just some oxygen tubing that you can get, and it works really well. So yeah, so that's pretty much what I'm at right now. I can't work with I can't I can't do the motor stuff until the frame is all ready, but I'm going to leave this motor aside, and in the meantime I'm going to be working on drilling the holes out and installing DCC sound, at least for the plugs and whatnot. Oh, and also installing, or yeah, just figuring that kind of stuff out. So yeah, that's the current update. We'll see what happens later. Alright, and this is the compilation of everything. So after taking everything apart, stripping the paint, priming it, painting it black, and then using a satin finish, this underframe is finally complete. I painted the frame, the pilot, the pistons, and the wheels, as well as the front leading truck, right here, as you can see. Yeah, so turned out really well, actually. I'm impressed by how well it turned out. I also stripped all the rods. I take all the rods apart, all the little tiny screws and everything apart. I stripped the paint and I reassembled it. I didn't like the black rods. I like the nice and new looking finish. So I'm just gonna leave it like this. And yeah, so reassembling the rods was rather a bit of a pain. But now that's complete, I'm really happy with it. The suspension is a little bit strange. They have these, instead of springs, they use spring wire. As you can see, there's a wire that just basically goes through the entire thing and pushes down on the wheels. And so it actually works rather well, as you can see here. It is sort of a cheaper way of springing the chassis, but it works. So I mean, I don't, I'm not complaining. As you can see here, some rather nice suspension. I also cleaned all the insides out and also the wheels, so there's no paint inside here on the bearings or anything like that, and so As you can see, it rolls really freely, which is always what you like to see. So yeah, the chassis is pretty much done. All I have to do is reassemble the gearbox and the can motor, which fits perfectly inside here. I'm going to paint the gearbox sides black, just brush paint because I don't really care. But just basically I want to hide it. I don't want to have a big, you know, shiny brass piece on inside here. Also note that I also didn't paint. I masked a few areas off because I don't like having paint touching. You know, I like the wherever you don't see. I'd rather prefer bare brass because, you know, when you glue the motor on, which I'm going to use silicone glue to glue. I don't want to glue it on a painted surface. I'd rather glue it on a bare brass surface, which is much better. One last thing, and I kind of already worked ahead here, is the front piece here. I used Alclad 2 for the first time, which is some really nice metallic paint. I used a magnesium, excuse me. I used the color magnesium in their vast list of colors, and I just used Scale Code 2 black paint for the rest. I applied the decals, as you can see here. This is just micro scale decals. It doesn't match perfectly with the champ decals that the guy used on the engine, because they used the white decals, whereas I used silver decals, because silver ones are more accurate for the era I'm modeling, at least. So it's a bit off, but it's really small, and so you really don't notice it. And also, I spent a whole lot of time making sure the numbers were perfectly straight and aligned. But yeah, so this front piece looks so much better now with the headlight lowered and painted up. It looks great. I really like how it turned out. And yeah, so I already added the LEDs inside there already. I'll go into more detail as far as how I do the LEDs in the next segment, which will be about the electronics and DCC. But for now, I'm just doing the repair of the mechanism right now. And so yeah, this is pretty much done now. I just need to add the motor and the gearbox, and that should pretty much be it for part 1. So we'll see how it turns out. Alright, I think the detailing and the painting for this engine is finally done, as well as the mechanism. So real quick, I forgot to mention in the last update that I actually did put a satin finish on the smoke wax front here, so it is not just bare paint. And as far as the mechanism goes, I painted the gearbox, as you see the outside of it, part of it black, and then also I installed a Canon motor. I ended up not using the Canon DN22 motor because that one actually has a very, very low top RPM. And so it actually ran very slowly, even with the 18-volt controller set at max. And so I ended up just using a simple Mabuchi. I think this is an FF180 motor or something like that. But in any case, the gearbox is rather noisy actually, so it's not the quietest runner, but it runs actually very, very smooth, and I'll give a demonstration of that right now. And this type of controller is terrible. It can't show you slow speed. It basically goes from 0 automatically to like 12 volts, and then it just jumps higher from there. And that is actually intentional. Those controllers were designed to run open frame motors, which take a lot of current, and so that's why even the slowest speed on this makes this thing go pretty fast. But anyways, yeah, so you can see how it runs. It runs very, very smoothly, and it looks great, actually. Just the noise is a little bit loud, but it's good enough for me. It's quieter than the PFM United gearboxes, and that's all that really matters. So yeah, anyways, this is part 1. Part 2, I'm going to be doing the electrical stuff. I actually filmed a few clips already, as you can see. But I'm going to upload them as separate parts so we can get this thing more organized. But in any case, that's it. I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you guys learned something. And I'm pretty excited to see this project moving along. Hopefully I can get it done within a few days. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.